Welcome to this explainer on the wild evolution of the Apple Watch. Today, we're looking at the fascinating journey of a device that basically conquered the world, ironically, while it was still searching for its own identity. We're going to cover a story full of scrappy prototyping, a massive marketing pivot, some truly cutting-edge health tech, and yeah, a good bit of corporate drama too. Let's get right into it. So, what was Apple's first really big post-Steve Jobs product? Well, it's the Apple Watch. But honestly, the absolute craziest part about its creation is that when Apple first greenlit the project, they didn't actually have any specific use cases in mind. They seriously didn't know what problems a smartwatch would solve. They just had this gut feeling that technology was inevitably going to move right onto the human body. Kevin Lynch, Apple's VP of Technology, actually hit the nail on the head regarding their early mindset. He pointed out that the goal wasn't just to build a specific tool. The real motivation was to try and save us from being constantly nagged by our phone screens. You know, that fatigue of being glued to your device? They felt a watch could offer a more human, way less intrusive way to stay engaged with the digital world. They essentially wanted to use more technology to, well, free us from technology. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the post-Jobs gamble and finding a purpose. Back in late 2011, right after Steve Jobs passed away, Apple started kicking around these wrist tech concepts. And man, it is fascinating just how scrappy these beginnings were. The software development was moving way faster than the hardware, so to test out the interface, the team literally strapped an iPhone to a wrist using Velcro. I mean, the on-screen watch crown was even turned into a physical dongle that they plugged straight into the headphone jack. And because those early app designs just mimicked the iPhone a bit too closely, they had to grind through 3 full rounds of UI redesigns just to avoid interactions feeling clunky and annoying. Which brings us to Section 2, from fashion to fitness, the identity pivot. This is, without a doubt, one of the biggest product pivots in consumer tech history. Think back to the launch. The Apple Watch was aggressively marketed as a luxury fashion accessory. We are talking 18-karat gold models with price tags up to $17,000. But the market spoke, and Apple listened fast. They completely dropped the hyper-luxury models once they realized the device's true calling was being an indispensable health tracker. So today, it's positioned almost entirely as a life-saving medical tool that just happens to live on your wrist. Moving right along to Section 3, Innovation Under the Hood, let's deconstruct the sensors. To really understand this health pivot, we have to talk about the complex sensors packed inside that tiny casing. Apple uses a technology called photoplethysmography. I know, it's a mouthful, right? But it actually breaks down into 3 surprisingly simple steps based on light absorption. Blood naturally absorbs green light and reflects red light. So by shining LEDs on your skin and measuring the reflection hundreds of times per second, the watch can calculate your exact heart rate. You've essentially got a miniaturized health lab strapped to your arm. And over the years, this hardware just kept advancing at an unbelievable pace. Back in 2018, the Series 4 dropped, becoming the first consumer device capable of taking an FDA-cleared electrocardiogram. Then they added blood oxygen monitoring in 2020 and temperature sensors for cycle tracking in 2022. By 2024 and 2025, we were seeing FDA-approved sleep apnea detection and even hypertension notifications that monitor the shape and speed of your pulse wave. It totally transformed the wrist from a basic notification screen into a completely legitimate medical dashboard. Let's dive into Section 4, Patent Wars and Controversies, Navigating the Drama. But you know, when you pioneer entirely new medical tech, you're inevitably going to step on some toes. A huge example of this is the patent dispute with the medical technology company Masimo. It escalated so incredibly fast, Masimo alleged Apple infringed on their light-based pulse oximetry patents. And the U.S. International Trade Commission actually ruled against Apple. This was a massive deal, causing them to completely halt U.S. sales of their flagship Series 9 and Ultra 2 right before Christmas in 2023. To finally get the feature back in 2025, Apple had to engineer a really clever software workaround, completely offloading the raw data processing from the watch over to the paired iPhone to circumvent the patent. Now, the watch has also faced some pretty intense scrutiny regarding its environmental marketing. Apple positioned their newer models as their very first carbon-neutral products, claiming up to an 81% emissions reduction and 100% clean electricity used during manufacturing. However, environmental groups and nonprofits pushed back hard, criticizing this as greenwashing. Critics pointed out that Apple was relying on forestry carbon offsets certified by Verra, which some investigative reports have alleged were largely worthless. They also noted that suppliers still heavily use fossil fuels, and some of Apple's tree planting investments relied on eucalyptus monocultures, where trees were just cut down within a decade anyway. It really presents a stark contrast between corporate marketing and environmentalist accounting standards. And adding to those IP and environmental challenges, the Apple Watch also ran headfirst into some strict international trade regulations. In late 2024, Indonesia flat out banned the sale of the brand new Series 10. The reason? Apple failed to meet a government requirement stating that 40% of the device's components had to be locally sourced or certified. It's a perfect example of how global tech giants have to navigate these incredibly complex local laws just to get their products into the hands of consumers. And finally, Section 5, a decade of dominance, the market impact. So despite all those legal battles and regulatory bans we just walked through, the overall consumer reaction has been nothing short of staggering. 267.6 million. That is the estimated number of Apple Watches sold by 2023. It firmly establishes it not just as a successful smartwatch, but literally as the best-selling wearable device on the planet. I mean, what started as a messy software prototype stuck on with Velcro is now actively sitting on the wrists of over 100 million people worldwide. And if you really want to understand the true scale of that disruption, check out this mind-blowing fact. In 2020, the Apple Watch outsold the entire Swiss watch industry, combined. Just think about that for a second. A single digital product line, heavily focused on health and notifications, managed to completely eclipse centuries of traditional, mechanical Swiss watchmaking dominance in just 5 years on the market. Apple locked in this cultural and market dominance by aggressively expanding the whole lineup. They rolled out the budget-friendly Apple Watch SE in 2020 to make the ecosystem way more accessible. Then they set their sights on the high-end fitness market that Garmin used to dominate, launching the rugged, titanium Apple Watch Ultra for endurance athletes. And under the hood, the watchOS software became way more independent. It moved away from strictly needing the iPhone, while hardware capabilities expanded to include 5G connectivity and even satellite messaging. Today, there really is an Apple Watch for virtually every type of consumer at every budget. To wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this thought. After transforming from an incredibly expensive gold fashion piece into an everyday life-saving medical tool that absolutely conquered the globe, where does a device that has already achieved so much go from here? Does it eventually become entirely invisible? Will it replace our phones completely? The next 10 years of wearable tech are going to be wild, and we really hope this breakdown helped you understand exactly how we got to this point.